Well, thank you very much for this such an amazing and beautiful introduction. I'm really delighted to be here. I'm surprised, this screen is huge. I feel really small from here. I feel a little bit intimidated. Thank you to the forum. I'm delighted to be here and share a little bit of what we do. So hopefully you'll enjoy. And I'm also delighted that I saw some familiar faces, that I haven't seen in a while, which makes me really happy. We are called MMX. Usually they think that MMX has something to do with Mexico, but actually it doesn't. It's just a Roman numeral for 2010, which is when we started the office. So we've been here working for 13 years already. That's the door to our office. We're a Mexico City-based practice. These are images from our office. We like them. We like always to show a little bit of our office because we think the office speaks for what we do. So we have a lot of models everywhere. We have the model shop models in this courtyard. We are in Condesa, in the very heart of Mexico City. We have a small pavilion at the top, and there you have Diego, Jorge, Nacho, and myself. We are the 4 partners of Mexico City-based MMX. So we do. What is it that we do? We do a little bit of everything. Since we started, we have been doing different museum installations. We have been doing. Now this is another one with credit cards for a fashion show, for instance. Or in Portugal, we did another one at the Fashion Museum. But we like to do gardens as well. We think gardens are a really interesting spatial challenge, for architects, to be developed. And we have a lot of residential projects, mainly in Mexico City. We have been doing all these residential projects, also in the outskirts of Mexico City, and we have work in the countryside. We have done various of these second homes in Valle de Bravo, Avándaro, which are these towns like 2 hours or 2 hours away from Mexico. So we've been busy. We are very much interested in geometry, structure, and the relationship with the landscape, materiality. We haven't been only doing a residential project. We have been doing also housing, different scales, again, mainly in Mexico City. We have been doing all these office buildings and industrial buildings as well. This is one in Guadalajara. We recently finished like 2 or 3 years ago. So we have all these range of private projects, but tonight I'm not going to talk about any of that. So yeah, because we have all these projects and we really love them. But today we really wanted to talk about one thing that for us is really important, and I think here, being in Dallas with you, it was worth sharing, and worth having a discussion, not about these private projects. And we're not really interested in I mean, the notion of public spaces is not public spaces or public projects, because we're not interested in whether it's public or private. It's not a matter of ownership, but we're interested in this idea, this dimension of collectiveness. So, the collective, about a collective space, how do we use it and how do we relate to space as a community? We think that it starts with how we deal with space as an individual and how we relate and act with one another. And, that can get really extreme in major cities like Mexico City. This is Mexico City subway during peak hour, where people don't want to be together, but they have to. So whether it's not by choice or by choice, like in this soccer game in Mexico, where people gather to be together as a community, that's a completely different idea, but it's the same event, which I believe you have here. The equivalent would be probably the American football, that I guess you only call it football. So the idea of this presentation was to reflect upon our role as architects, the landscape architects, and how we as designers, when designing collective space, what is it that we need to be thinking about? What are the right questions? What should be thinking when designing collective space? So the first thing we would like to talk about is this ecological dimension of collective space. That goes beyond human activity, to the very backdrop of human settlements, the territory, which was there before all of us, and it is as diverse as we can imagine. These are all different landscapes across Mexico. But we are really interested in the relationship between the territory and the man-made structures. This is an old church that got completely covered with lava in the 50s. But there's floods, there's hurricanes, earthquakes, that continue the battle between these two systems. So it feels like we should stop going against it and rather try to coexist in a more integral manner. As it was Mexico City 500 years ago. This is a picture, an image from Diego Rivera. Our basin, the valley we live in, used to be a system of lakes. And Tenochtitlan, that was the name of the city, the pre-Hispanic settlement, had a great and delicate relationship with the territory. This is an amazing image that just came out in social media, done by Thomas Cole. He did a 3D model of how Mexico City looked like 500 years ago. So that's Mexico City 500 years ago. And exactly the same view. He put the same view, the actual view from today, and it looks like this. We've done everything wrong, all these years. And don't get me wrong, because I love Mexico City, you should all go there. It's amazing, but how did we go from, did we went from this to this? It's horrible. So the question is, what do we do now to restore and recover the relationship with our own geography? And this is, we've been doing some projects that start to address, in our minds, at least in our discussions, we are trying to push them so that we can start addressing these notions. So I'm going to talk about this project. This is a competition that we did for a 2-mile linear corridor in Mexico City, along these underutilized train tracks. So we ask ourselves, what is the role of these 2 miles within the larger context of the city? And we saw an opportunity to have a greater impact for the city, not only designing 2 miles of beautiful pavements, but actually triggering with this project a larger, more ambitious strategy that could benefit other parts of Mexico City. So establishing a long-term vision as well. So we looked at the cultural and public destinations that the city already offers around it, museums, universities, sport facilities. There's a lot of things already in Mexico City. You don't have to build anything else. So we started mapping these things together, and we realized, you have these dots, which are all the destinations, and the lines would represent the consolidated corridors. If you've been to Mexico City, Reforma would be the one large one, dark line there. So we realized that this corridor, this 2-mile corridor, was very much in proximity with the consolidated existing corridors. And we felt, just by looking at this map, that we could easily complete the drawing. It felt like, you almost want to fill the gap. So we did it. And instead of working with an isolated corridors with no origin or destination, we could create a circuit, we said, a loop that could connect all these corridors together, integrating all the different neighborhoods and the destinations into one coherent ring that would establish new relationships between the areas and dots that could have, seemed disconnected otherwise. So we went from a system of isolated points to a compelling urban ring that started to be developed as a mobility strategy, landscape strategy, water management strategy, etc. So we could see now a way to go back, to our own geography, integrating back some of the elements that we lost when the city grew. So we proposed to implement along this loop a series of local native species that could represent the geography that runs across the basin from the mountains all the way down to the water-oriented landscapes at the bottom of the valley. So this is the plan we presented, establishing a new identity for the whole corridor, creating what we called the garden loop, el circuito jardín. So we started with a project of 2 miles. We got carried away, and we ended up submitting a proposal for an urban ring of 10 miles. And of course, we had to develop the first stage, otherwise, they would have said, this is. So we did it. But this first stage was only an excuse for us to trigger a larger long-term vision, that could renovate and integrate the existing public buildings. We presented a vision that could incorporate water management strategy within the collective space, so that you can see how it works when leaving the city. With a series of public botanical gardens along the loop that will bring back the lost territory. And we also saw the implementation of some social programs along it. So this is our proposal for the garden loop, a project of many projects. We could, a lot of architects and urban designers and landscapers could live out of this project for the 20 next years. We could all have work, if the government wants to pay for all the things that need to be done. So this is a long-term vision. And even though it looks like a complex idea, in the end, we think that we only changed the way we see the city. We did nothing. We drew a line. We changed the mental map, the way we see the city. So as if we were giving a simple tourist map, that makes evident the relationships that were already there, but we could not see. So this is another project that talks about this ecological dimension. And this, we just as an anecdote, we were second place because the jury said that it was an amazing project, but it was far too ambitious. So that was a 2-mile project. So we were really ambitious, and we got into this project to design a 10-mile project because we said, this you cannot get more ambitious. So this is a project in Madrid where we teamed up with an interdisciplinary team in Spain. The government wanted to create this ring belt and launch this competition for each of these polygons that you see there. So we decided to develop one on the southeast, the black one. And the question was, what is there, and what do we need to improve there? And the answer was evident but not obvious because we are trained to think about human infrastructure. But instead, we had pine forest and we had oak forests and we have wildlife. There were no humans, no buildings. So as architects, you feel really confused. So we developed this vision that worked like a sequence of rings, where we have an inner, more urban forest with the brownfields at the edge of the Madrid, an outer very natural forest that would work as a buffer between the satellite settlements, and a water-oriented landscape in the middle that would improve the hydric systems of rivers, streams, and water bodies that run across the site. We call it the 3 forests of the southeast. The urban one, the water-oriented one, and the outer ring. And again, we work with biologists. It was amazing. Hydrologists, agricultural engineers, botanists, amazing people to create a mobility strategy, landscape strategy, water management strategy, energy production, phasing, a lot of things that were amazing discussions. It was not about buildings. It was not about buildings or integrating human activity here, but rather about understanding the role of each part of the natural system so that we could work together and thrive as a whole. It was about restoring wetlands, reforestation, noise reduction, clean energy production. We had endless discussions on where we could better bridge the highways to provide wildlife crossing and trails. And I really like this image. This is one of the many images we presented at the end of the competition. And I like it because there's no buildings, there's not even humans. But it took us a while to do this image because we were working with these biologists, and they would be like, no, this tree needs to be a little bit larger because they cannot be that close. They're not going to believe that these 2 pine trees can grow. And we were really okay. And it took us a while, but this is an image that it really represents what we be thinking about. So we are convinced that by improving this, we are somehow improving the quality of Madrid, who you can see over there at the back. I'm going to show another really tiny project in comparison to this one that talks about this ecological dimension. This project is located in this beautiful landscape we call Valle del Mezquital. It's in the middle of the country, right in the center, exactly where the oil pipes run. And so you have the oil refinery, among other industrial structures. And there are poor communities where you can find what you might call oil thieves. We call them huachicoleros. They pinch all pipes to extract petrol and sell it. And as you can imagine, this is a really dangerous activity where explosions happen very often, killing people and affecting the community. So together with the government, we developed a proposal to implement various projects in some affected communities, designing public space, public facilities that would hopefully improve the services and the quality of the urban space and therefore their everyday life. So we started with this small but interesting project at the central square of one of the communities. This is a typical typology of where you have a central kiosk, a garden, and streets around it. So we met with the local community, and we were told that they hated their kiosk. They said, this is horrible. Somebody built it 20 years ago, and somebody thought it was a good idea to put a restaurant at the bottom. It was never used. And now it's just a storage space. They told us as well that the remaining platform on top was far too high to be used. So they asked us to demolish it and replace it with a lower, more transparent structure. We also noticed that they had this car-oriented configuration with a really poor relationship between the building, frontages, and the public square. With really small sidewalks insufficient for retail and active uses that they have there. So this is the plan of how we found this place. So we developed a set of simple actions. It's really simple to improve the collective space, changing from this to this, just extending the pedestrian pavement all the way up to the buildings. And we proposed the integration of a garden that could incorporate the original landscape within it so as to recover a little bit of their own geography. But the challenge here was to maintain the garden. So we saw an opportunity to integrate the water management strategy there by designing the kiosk. So the kiosk was the key to everything. So designing it in a way that it could collect rainwater as a Roman impluvium and then store it underneath, to then release it slowly during the following days and weeks, making sure that the landscape would thrive. So this is how we ended up. This is the project with the extended pavement, creating these larger, more pedestrian-oriented collective spaces. So now they have a huge square with a new kiosk in the middle. This more permeable and lower structure that had not only addressed the needs of the community, but had also helped them by managing stormwater runoff, filtering fresh water to the soil, and ensuring resilient and strong green areas. But we really like the idea that this natural fountain puts metaphorically and literally the discussion of water management among the community. It gives them a physical dimension to the problem and makes visible one of the many solutions available. When we presented and construction started, we met with the community, and the first thing they said is like, why is it a hole in the middle of this kiosk? And we told them, because this is a project. This hole is basically the whole idea. So it's the water is going to come in. Imagine this is a fountain. So when it rains, you have a natural fountain there. So the water, and then we explain. And once they got it, it was like, oh, this is really nice. I'm going to tell my neighbors, every time they ask. And I'm sure, every single guy and women and children that go there, I'm sure they all ask, well, is there a hole in the middle of the kiosk? And they ask us, can a mariachi band, fit in here? And we did a demonstration, and there were like 50 people surrounding, and then 30 of them there, and it was okay. So we passed the test. The other dimension I'd like to talk about today is this dimension, the historical, cultural dimension of collective space. This dimension is very well rooted into the territory. It's more about construction techniques, materials, traditions. It's also about communities, how they use collective space. What activities do they do? You know, we have markets that look like this or like that. You have also these farmer markets. You know, sometimes communities, might need a collective space, just a roof to discuss politics, or watch a game, or listen to a concert. So all these various needs and many more I can even imagine need to take place within the collective space. So that raises the question of what is the perfect space that could house all these various activities. You know, we believe collective spaces should not be specific. They should be ambiguous, they should be flexible and diverse, so that, they can adapt to a wider range of unimaginable needs. You know, like a Roman basilica, that started being a market originally and then turned into a church typology, but then, now they could perfectly work as a concert venue or a contemporary shopping mall. You know, they're like timeless. So the collective facilities must be ambiguous and universal. At least that's what we think, so that they can evolve together with the community that uses it, that's in constant change. So I'm going to show you some projects, for the same community that we designed the garden with the kiosk. We were asked to design also a library, a kindergarten, a community center, and a cultural center. And all these programs, the government thought they needed these programs, but they weren't really certain. So it was a great opportunity for us to test the ideas on flexible universal spaces. So we took and we looked and we started by analyzing this traditional otomi house as a starting point with the pitched roofs and beautiful walls made out of this beautiful white limestone. And we designed a unit, a module that would have a wide range of options, going from enclosed spaces, open spaces, a gradient between open and closed. It had various rooms, covered spaces, an open courtyard, and some ambiguous space there, here in the corner that was, neither open nor closed because the roof would go down, as you can see here in the facades, would go down and up, and then you would create a space with no walls, but it was covered enough to create a space. So we have here the interior space. It's this pitch roof and limestone walls with this universal enclosed space, with a mezzanine in case they needed to grow, with an open courtyard, and this space that was in the corner that was neither closed, not open. It wasn't a room, but it was a room. So it was, like a covered space. But we like this idea of have these really ambiguous spaces that they could use in ways that we couldn't even imagine. So this is our own version of the traditional otomi house, in a way, with this roof that extends and goes up and goes down to create this ambiguous space in the corner, and then to go up again to create the entrance. So with this flexible, diverse, universal module, we designed a library with one unit, and then we did a cultural center and a kindergarten with two separate modules, and we developed a larger community center by adding these two modules together, putting them one next to the other. So we had a variety of programs perfectly solved with the same modular structure. So we have pictures of this small library we did in Hidalgo, and the cultural center and the kindergarten, with two modules. And when put together, here we have the community center, in a different plot, with a roof that goes up and down and creates new relationships when put together, a new spatial conditions that could hopefully be useful to the users. And that hopefully will adapt to the ever-changing needs of the community, and of course, hopefully they will adapt to the ever-changing landscape that surrounds it. Even when this probably will turn into more of an urban area, we believe that it's introverted enough to cope with that. So this is another project. The site is located 2 hours away from Mexico and sits at the right at the edge of the main road and extends into the open fields. It's a beautiful place, again with these traditional pitch roof structures with stone walls, but these are volcanic rocks, not limestone. Here we were asked to develop a master plan for a non-profit organization for a long-term vision of an art school for children of the area. The project had workshops and classrooms and an auditorium here, and a restaurant and some residences, a museum, a gallery. It was really ambitious. So they wanted to build just the first stage, this here. It was like the entrance of the plot. The first volume housing the gallery and the restaurant. But they asked us to design it in a way that it would work as a small version of the entire school, with workshops and with classrooms and with a restaurant, etc. So that the spaces had to accommodate different uses at the beginning and have to be able to adapt to the constant changes as they will grow. So we developed this scheme, this two-patio scheme, with two modules that will create a larger space when put one next to the other. That would provide the school with a wide range of open and closed spaces, just like the other ones, ambiguous enough to adapt to the required needs in time. And as you can see, the interaction between these two elements allowed us to create these spaces of different scales, only using and developing one structural section. Then when put side to side, it would create this larger span and a different spatial condition at the center. So this is how the first stage looks like now on the side, with these black roofs against the landscape, and these patios of various sizes, designed for the various events that they could have, like more civic ones. And this is just like a traditional portico scheme that we find in traditional Mexican architecture everywhere. So we weren't inventing anything else, anything. We were just rethinking how to put it here in this project. We had these corridors, like these in-between spaces, and this is the central, the enclosed spaces. A series of flexible interior spaces that we could see working as galleries, or maybe a workshop or a classroom, or you could subdivide this and put some office program. So we just had to provide some good light and some views and air running through this space. And this is a very fluid exterior but covered space that could function as an auditorium or for a presentation or for a celebration, for a concert, or even to place, and we could put the altar de muertos, this altar we do in the traditional celebration that we have in November. So this is how it ended up. It looks really big from here. I'm amazed. So we designed the gardens as well, with local native species to try and reinforce. We're really stubborn. We do everything. We do always the same thing. So we were trying to put the geography back then. So we designed these gardens. We have this water tower that will serve, and a huge water storage space underneath this central space there that will serve for the the future growth. We have all the water solved. So you have one of the courtyards that has like small like this area paved there, and the other one is more civic one, and it's very introverted. Because it's just like sitting there right next to the highway. And for us, it was just, we needed to put it there and to create this patio so as to create a sequence that would lead to the open space, this beautiful open space that you have there for the next stages. This is another project that took place at the Zócalo. If you've been in Mexico, you probably can recognize this. Probably one of the largest collective spaces in Latin America. A place where scale is difficult to understand when empty, but it can fit loads and loads and loads of people there. So once a year, the local government invites the embassies that have base in Mexico City and gives them one stand each, one of these things, for them to showcase their culture. They can sell food or crafts or explain to the people the initiatives that they have. So each year, they invite one architectural studio to design a small temporary auditorium. In this case, it was this one. This is not done by us. It was done by Productora. They're great friends and very talented architects. Somebody here, I just met somebody here that knows one of the partners, Querido Bone. So he and his team did this thing. So, but the government would ask for this to design this, but then it would rent conventional tents to accommodate all the embassies. So, we were invited for the next year, and then we saw an opportunity to create a new powerful urban dynamic for this amazing urban space. And we asked them, to the organizers, what if we don't design this? What if we can design the whole thing, an integral version, an integral vision as well that would incorporate not only the small auditorium, but also the rest of the stands. So we had a more of an urban approach to this problem. In our minds, we weren't designing a building, we were transforming the entire public space, breaking it down into smaller, more suitable spaces for the community to enjoy. So we presented these three structures with the auditorium in the center, a more dramatic space that belonged to everyone. So this is the final result there. We had to build this in 2 days. That's Latin America, I guess. This is the final result, the 3 articulated collective spaces and a temporary structure that would be mimicking the surrounding porticos of the historic buildings. You see here, it's the same typology with porticos there. Here you can see the porticos with the stands facing the smaller squares and the auditorium right in the center. So we went from a structural unit to a portico that looked more or less like this, to a building that was very much in line with the long rhythmical historic facades of the existing civic buildings that you have there, and the central auditorium at the very heart of the Zócalo, this triangular flexible space that was programmed throughout the 2 weeks. Then we had also a space designated to concerts, to large concerts, and another one coping with the continuous flow of people. And finally, it was all connected to the city, and we believe to the buildings that surround it, changing the scale of this vast space. We couldn't put these tables here, unless we broke this space into smaller areas. So we were reconfiguring temporarily the facades of the collective space as a mirror of the existing historic structures, the portico from a portico. The next dimension we'd like to talk about is this dimension of landscape in collective space. In our culture, the landscape comes first. All the built structures have no programs inside. All these pyramids here have no program inside. So they have been built to structure and define the open space. So we have all these amazing examples in Mexico where it's difficult to know where the landscape finishes and the man-made structures begin. We also have these colonial portico structures where you're not inside or outside, but somewhere in between. And we have this modern architecture from the 50s that has a clear landscape approach to architecture, like this Olympic stadium that looks as if it had been sculptured from the site. It's really a beautiful piece of architecture. Or this beautiful landscape sculpture done by Matthias Geritz that defines an outside and an inside in a territory that had no limits or structures. So it's just like drawing a line, and then the space and the relationship between the landscape completely changes. So I'm going to talk about this really simple, very small project that we were asked to here to renovate the central square of a small indigenous town in Tabasco, on the south of Mexico. And as you can see, they had some existing buildings inside the public space that they wanted to keep and integrate into the new design. Like this unfortunate building in here and this unfortunate roof that you can see here. So we had to recover that. So we tried different options where a new element could organize and integrate all the existing structures and at the same time define areas with varying characters, with varying character for the different programs to take place. So that was the final scheme we decided to go for, and this was the result. It's a very simple project, a portico-like structure. We were drawing a line. It's a portico that would give a new facade to all the elements, to the new ones and to the old ones, unifying the language and strengthening the identity of the space. So sometimes these porticos will have a single level. Sometimes it would be a double height that would integrate the existing roof that you see on the left side. creating this double tier facade with different levels, creating this rhythmic geometric foreground for the elements that were already there. The usable spaces inside, like this basketball pitch there. So it was all about creating these new thresholds, establishing the new hierarchies that would articulate the different areas and the different uses. And it was not a building. It was like a landscape strategy somehow. We were just drawing a line. This is another project. It's 1 out of 3 that you're going to see. We designed for some communities in Nayarit, right next to the Pacific coast. A community that produces bricks, that sits right on a floodplain that sadly gets flooded when large hurricanes hit. That is very often. So we didn't want them to feel vulnerable with our project. And so we searched for some examples where the architecture could coexist with the water dynamics, like this Chillida Square in Spain or the Indian step wells. And I just went today for the first time in my life to the water gardens of Philip Johnson, and my mind is such an amazing, I feel ashamed not to have put this example in here. So I say sorry for that, but so this the site was this large open space that goes from one street to another street here. There's a church here, a school, and some retail that had this series of unfortunate interventions through time, blocking the natural flows and creating these impractical, underutilized areas. So we created an artificial topography that would restructure the dynamics of this space, creating 2 streets, connecting 2 streets, and defining some areas for different activities. And everything was done only with platforms, as a topographic gesture. So here you can see the site, the 2 main streets, the market, you can see the church, and you can see here the new space, the intervention that defines the central flow in here, an open-air auditorium in the middle, and a series of smaller spaces in here, one for the church, another one for the school, and 2 more on the south for the frontages, the active frontages that were mainly retail. So this is one view from from the street, how this looks like. This is the entrance with the historic sculpture dedicated to motherhood. They already had that. It almost looks like a pre-Hispanic structure, like a pyramid. We didn't think about that. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it just looks like a pyramid. With this intimate forum at the heart of the plaza, a multi-purpose space here that leads to these corridors, these intricate and confined spaces that go down to connect to the adjacent areas that face the active frontages with a different scale, where there is no need for benches because the platforms will naturally transform into stands. So as you go across this space, the space is really fluid. It goes up and it goes down. It opens up and it narrows down all the way from one street to the other. So we like to think that this space is neither a building nor a landscape. It's something there in between that sits, it's just right there in between this gradient. It's not a building, it's a structure, but we pushed the landscape idea, a little bit too much. Maybe it started to be built, but it's not yet a building or an architectural element. So with the same principles, this was the first one. We designed 2 more projects. One for a small space in front of a small church, right at the edge of the town. And another one with these revolving gardens and playgrounds and a roof. These ones had a roof in the middle. Right in the middle, a multi-purpose space, a flexible space for the community to enjoy. That was our version of the palapa roof, this palm leaves roofs that you can find in the traditional architecture along the coast nearby. So I'm going to talk about another project that was pushing this idea of landscape. The next project is this site museum we were asked to design in this place, in this town that's called Progreso in Yucatan. It had an existing public open space that was never used. This is an image of the site before we actually did the project. And it was never used because the heat here and the sun, it would be unbearable during the day. And because it was a site museum, and then we were asked to do a site museum that would talk about the whole region and the culture. We wanted the museum to speak for itself. Instead of just having information inside the museum, we thought that maybe the museum can start to talk about what this culture is. In order to convey the representative aspects of that culture and the geography without having to explain it. So we asked ourselves, what are the elements that would be important to integrate in here? And we thought, first of all, the project is here, right, in the waterfront. First of all, the project is located in this perfect colonial urban grid that we only find in this peninsula in Mexico, because the region is completely flat, and unlike the rest of the colonial cities in Mexico, it does not get distorted when adapting to the topography. You have a lot of these American cities with these grids, these perfect grids, and in Mexico, across Mexico, because we have all the mountains, a lot of the towns they have really a lot of topography, so we don't get to have this perfect grid. We only have it in this region. So we also have these archaeological Maya ruins with their distinctive Mayan arch that is unique to the southeast of Mexico. And of course, we have the geometric heavy walls of the colonial haciendas and buildings covered with this very distinctive finish that we call chucum. It's this yellowish finish. Of course, we should not forget the cenotes and the landscape, the sinkholes, these natural pits that expose the freshwater underground streams, where you can find these water caves with these amazing natural light wells. These spaces are really magical. When you go there with the light coming in, and it's really beautiful. And because this was the exact location where the meteorite that extinguished most of the dinosaurs. I don't know if you knew, but Progreso is a place where scientists say that is that where the meteorite hit. So there is a strong geological condition that could be represented as well. So this is the project. The project is a perfect grid, a scale model of the city with the streets and corridors, a small version of them, a sort of geological structure that goes up and down to represent the impact, with a continuous accessible slope that allows people to cross it. So we didn't lose any footage for open space. It's all public. It's a continuous accessible slope that allows people to cross it, creating usable spaces to house some different various activities when it goes up. So this is the floor plan at the ground level. With the interior, this is the interior galleries, which is just like a fourth of the whole site. We decided that we didn't want to do a building that filled with interior spaces, but here we needed to have lots of different open public spaces, collective spaces. The interior gallery is here, and the exterior shaded public space, the largest one, is here. So you have a corridor, you can cross the building with no doors. It's a public space. And then at the roof plan, you can see here how you can go up to the building and cross it as a diagonal corridor that is created here, and the light well right in the middle, just like a cenote. So the building is really simple, just this grid, these blocks that go up and down. You have some interior spaces when you go up, and then you have something in between, these spaces that are inside these boxes, but they're open, they have no roof, so they bring shade, but there's something in between. And this is a picture of the building. There you can see, the scheme there, how you have these two corridors with the center, and then the interior spaces, these sort of exterior but covered spaces, and then the open spaces that you can go up and down. So that's a view of this version of this little version of the city, this little grid with this very geometric and abstract, I would say, blocks that go up. They're made out of chucum, so they relate to the way we build haciendas and all these historic constructions. And you have this Mayan arch that it's the way we cut all the boxes. So you have this this sort of arch, but it's related to the region. You can go up and discover, probably pretty late when the sun goes down. At 8 o'clock, you can go up and enjoy the sunset. You can get into these corridors, which are open, all day long, all night long. This is just part of the city. And then you have these corridors as well here, these covered spaces, but they're open to public. You can walk through them if the sun is really hitting hard. And you have these gardens, and you have this relationship with the water, and a relationship, to this space that's in the middle. That for us, it was our version. A more abstract version of this idea of the water underground, the very heart of this project. And just like as a note, we wanted this to have light coming in from everywhere. And it's interesting how we did these boxes, with 4 points structurally, but then we have these larger spans because we have these 4 units. That we took out one of the legs, let's say, for each of these boxes, and when we span it in a way we create this larger span for these spaces to be more free, like free-like structures. So here you can see it. You are protected from the sun, but you have no roof, so you are basically outside. Or you can have a concert there. You can have a rest. You can You can do whatever you like because this is called collective space. And sometimes you have the water, sometimes you don't. The interior spaces for the gallery have the same structure. These spaces in between open and close with a very hard, very intimate space that you can go at any time. And this is the point where you enter the museum. If you are visiting the museum and you want to see the collection, then you have to go to this space and then enter. This is another project we did in 2017. The project started with 2 terrible news. In less than a month, 2 earthquakes hit Mexico. I don't know if you remember, but one in the south and the other one in the center. Morelos, one of the Mexican states not far away from Mexico City, was the most affected state, and Jojutla, the most affected urban settlement across the whole country. So as architects, we had a responsibility to act. So we traveled to Jojutla. It was not only us. Many really talented architects were traveling there. And these are images I actually took on my phone, visiting, and it was striking. We could see real damage everywhere. Houses collapsed. There were places where it was impossible to imagine what had been standing there. Even cultural heritage had been destroyed. But surprisingly, when we got to the river, it looked as if nothing had happened. When looking closer, though, problems beyond the earthquake became evident. The sewer system was polluting the river. We could not see a strategy for open space or mobility or growth. So it became clear that we needed to think and act beyond the earthquake. Maybe it was an opportunity to redirect the city to a better future. So nobody asked for it. Nevertheless, we developed a strategic long-term vision that served as a framework for immediate action. So we found like 40 projects that would be that could basically could build into this long-term vision. So many projects emerged from this vision, and we started doing houses for families that lost their homes. This is an image of one of the persons that we did a project for their plot. So we did 1, and then we did 2, and then we did 5. But then it wasn't enough. 2,000 homes had been damaged and had to be demolished, leaving almost 10,000 people living in tents. We were frustrated. How could we have a real impact under these conditions? So it was clear that a tree and maybe a shadow and a bench could provide a more dignified space for the community. So maybe in order to reach a larger community, we needed to work in a collective space, a space that belonged to everyone. And so we did. Out of our master plan, we developed a project for a civic heart, a set of underutilized spaces with no identity. The municipal building had been severely damaged. We found a public space with no quality, with no assets whatsoever, with underutilized built structures that had been added through time and have no purpose today. A terrible urban image, a really poor connection to its history and its territory, and we wanted to change all this. It was an opportunity to create a real change. So here we can see these two historic buildings in contrast with some structures placed with no apparent logic here, the black ones in the middle, and a public space that looked more like a leftover than an actual civic heart. It was really ambiguous. It was difficult to navigate. The limits weren't right. So the challenge was clearly to give structure to the public space. So we got rid of the underutilized structures. And we understood that just by we realized that just defining this only one quadrangle there would magically establish this diagonal sequence of public spaces, all perfectly contained, transforming a public space with no urban structure into a coherent urban sequence integrated into the urban fabric with the minimum intervention. We were trying to organize it with the minimum intervention. So this is our project for the central gardens of Jojutla. Now they had not one, but 4 different public spaces, 4 gardens with different atmospheres and uses. A soft one here with trees, a civic one here in front of the municipal building, then a portico-like structure surrounding a more intimate garden, and finally a small garden surrounding a playful pavilion. We wanted to create a project that felt that had always been there. Something that could be rooted in this culture, that could reinforce their identity, something as strong as this. This is a historic hacienda 5 minutes away from Jojutla. It looks like a beautiful Piranesi engraving. It is a ruin. Trees have taken over. It is built but has no roof. It's a monument of resilience. And look at this. Look at this beautiful quinceañera there. It's already an emblematic space, a symbolic one for them. Rooted in their culture. We wanted to create something that as strong as this, a modern ruin, our version of their beloved arches. So we tried. We created a unit, an arch, a structural system that could be added in different ways, using the very traditional brick construction that they have to create the different elements. So we created a northern pavilion. Here under construction. It's a cluster of arches that creates a field. It's something that it's very ambiguous, but could be used in different ways. And also we created this quadrangle, establishing new borders and thresholds here under construction. That gave somehow structure to the entire complex, creating new borders and new relationships. Just like this amazing landscape project from Matthias Gerrit that you saw, with the round landscape figure. It was doing exactly the same thing. Here you can see the whole sequence of these interconnected collective spaces, each one with a different atmosphere and different use. The first garden has been designed as a natural landscape, really natural as we could, with paths and corridors to make your way through, as if the city wasn't there, as if it was just a landscape that you found. With small spaces where people can sit and gather under the shadow of a tree. A garden with the minimum formal elements guiding you towards the quadrangle. There was a historic fountain there. A quadrangle that has a strong, solid presence that changes as you go around it, that looks dense but also porous, and enclosing this intimate garden where one can forget what happens outside. And then we had the civic space, flanked with palm trees, and finally a smaller pavilion where elder and children can have a quiet moment. From the exterior, the brick structures are dynamic. They can look really narrow like this one, or more open, to encourage flows. From the interior, they also change. They can look like this, really intimate corridors. Or like these, formal, more civic passages. It was important to us that the threshold, could be a space on its own. It had no room, but it could be a space, where one is no longer inside or outside, but somewhere in between, where arches create corridors, where is no longer an inside or an outside, or where arches can create fields. And what is amazing to us, this is the Northern Pavilion. It's a sort of kiosk, but it's not a kiosk, so they can do a lot of things in here, And it's really amazing to us, thinking that in 2017, it just looked like this. By December 2018, so it was just 1 year, and had to be designed and built, and we had like a process of social, participation, it was everything really quick, and it was just a little more than a year after. They didn't only have a vision or a project or an idea, but they had actually a built collective space. And a year after, we went back there in October, and it was just, it had just taken roots among the community. It was really beautiful to see how they have, been engaging with these spaces in ways we couldn't even imagine. This is Dia de Muertos, Day of the Dead, in October. It was really fantastic. And a year after, even the New York Times was writing about this initiative, not only about our buildings and our square, but we together with many other really talented colleagues. There were many projects done in Jojutla. Kalach did a small church, and there was Delecamp doing another one, and there were a lot of really Gabriela Carrillo doing a lot of stuff that actually made a difference. A place where 3 years before, it seemed to be lost and forgotten. So now I need some help to decide, whether this was the last slide or not, because I have like 2 or 3 slides more, because we're always asked, what are you doing now? And then so I put like 3 slides of one project. I wouldn't be explaining it, but if you want to see a little bit of what we are working on now, we can show these 3-4 slides, or we can.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm gonna show you just like images of these this one project. I just put one because we're now doing, again, public buildings and public space and collective space. But this is a project in Chilpancingo, in Guerrero. And this is the larger like urban space they have. This is, how it looked like a year ago. And they have this Plaza de Toros there, and they use this space once in a year. They have all this fair, and they get basically, you have a lot of stands for food and drinks, and they get drunk during a complete month. But then the space gets completely empty, unused, for the rest of the year. So they asked us to develop this master plan so we could energize like this space during the year. They put some new programs. So we decided to do a master plan. It looked like this. The quality of what we found, these streets and it was horrible. And they use this space, but it's really amazing space because it's so big in the middle of this. It's the capital of Guerrero, where Acapulco is. So we developed a plan to convert this into like this open space for everyone with a lot of sport-oriented pavilions. So you have like a soccer pitch in here. You have some basketball courts in here. You have some pavilions where they can put the restaurants or have some new events or things happening during the year. You have a new a venue here that they call the Palenque. It used to be I don't know if you know what a Palenque is, but it's where they have some concerts and things traditionally, and it's a round forum. And they had the Plaza de Toros and a church. So we transformed this into, they had streets, and we did this, taking the Plaza de Toros, we took these geometric, like circular elements and put them so that they would have this very fluid open space with no streets. It's basically just squares because you have hundreds and hundreds of people coming in here. And this is, it's under construction, and you can see how it's changing. So this is under construction, and because it's a large space and it was all, we thought, this needs to be an open space. Basically, we designed everything with bamboo, so we didn't want to feel that it was like done with concrete or with steel. So we wanted to feel that it was part of the landscape. So you can see here, the squares, how they're starting to come out, and these pavilions in different stages, how they're, and it's all made. It was really, it has been an amazing, at some point we regretted to because it's really complex. We always say, let's make it with bamboo, and then you realize you know nothing about, building with bamboo. And you have to. So we work with some engineers in Colombia, and it was really refreshing to see. So these are some images of this. Hopefully, next year, this is under construction. This is just some images we took last week when we were on site. So hopefully this will get done by December, they're saying, but I'm sure they're not going to be able to finish it by December. So this is it. I just wanted to show you something that we are working on, which is in progress. Thank you so much.